and like other areas, funding is a key issue. And I think, rural pharmacists especially are well placed to help take some pressure off rural general practice it is. And PSNZ, we've been advocating for this a lot more from members in recent months with key stakeholders like the Minister of Health, with Health New Zealand themselves and other pharmacy groups. And we've launched our Unleashing Pharmacy's Potential campaign, which has had good feedback, which has then flowed into our membership renewal, and that will be we'll be building on this how we unleash potential across all parts of pharmacy, rural, big cities, general practice, community, hospital, all parts. Um, and so I'm not the star show person this evening. We've got a fantastic guest speaker tonight, Dr. Rebecca Duran, who is the clinical director of the Rural Health Network, which you've heard of our last rural who we PSNZ we've joined. Um, in this role, and she can give a much better description than I, but she's leading efforts to improve access and outcomes for people living in rural New Zealand. I'd say she's very passionate about rural health. I've worked for her in the past, and she is a wealth of information. So I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca, and then we'll come back for some questions afterwards.
Thank you, Michael. Oh my goodness, big build up. I hope I can live up to it. So kia ora koutou, ko Bex Doran toku ingoa. So my background, I'm a GP. Originally, you can't get rid of the accent. I'm from the UK originally, where I trained as a rural GP, came over here 19 years ago, and was a rural GP owner out in Raglan for 10 years and had really close working relationship with the rural pharmacist out there. So completely appreciate the fantastic, big, enormous, amazing job that you guys do, and hopefully understand some of the challenges, but very open to hear other things. So thank you for inviting me along today. I've done a variety of other things in my career, but at present I'm newly in the role of Clinical Director of Hauora Taifenua, and was asked to come along and just chat with you a little bit about that and how we may be able to help support each other and what Hauora Taifenua does and things like that. So as always, I love doing slideshows. So hopefully me sharing my screen will work, and do tell me if it goes wrong. Now, hopefully you can see I'm sharing the actual slideshow, and fantastic. Feel free to interrupt me. I won't see if anyone puts their hands up. I'm not going to take any offense if you interrupt, or save your questions to the end. Either way, no problems. So, Hauora Taifenua Rural Health Network. Has it moved on your screen? Yep, cool. So, I just thought I'd put a summary on here. I'm going to skip over lots of these slides quickly. I will share them with you afterwards, so don't worry if you don't see them all. Collectively, we're trying to advocate for better rural health for all rural New Zealanders. So that's all health, primary care, pharmacy, allied health. We have commitment to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and as it says there, we're here to support the health and well-being of our members. Hopefully provide great advocacy for rural communities, and we also have some funded contracts, so hopefully produce excellent services under those as well. For those of you that don't know, this is the structure of Hauora Taifenua, has 9 chapters, of which pharmacy sits under the rural, scientific, technical and allied health, and I am trying to remember all of those names, hopefully with some success. There we go. Who is rural? You're probably aware that there's now the geographical classification of health, and using that as a filter, Hauora Taifenua produced this Rural Health New Zealand snapshot in 2024. It is going to be updated for next year, but in the meantime, this is the data that we've got, and I'll just, again, I won't dwell on it. I will just go through it quickly, but just some of the stats. We know that roughly 1 in 5 New Zealanders live rurally. We know higher percentage of Māori and Pacifica live rurally. For those of you that don't know, R1, R2 and R3 are the scores. As you go down the numbering, you become more and more remote. As I'm sure several of you in the call are in those places. It's just a nice quick map. Just some other more things. We know that the more rural you live, generally the statistics show you have your health outcomes aren't as good as if you live in large urban areas. Variety of different reasons for that. We know you have a higher mortality rate. We know suicide rates are higher. You're more likely to die from preventable diseases. And this is where you guys form part of helping support this and try and prevent all of this. And it's great that over the last few years, there's been much more of a focus on rural, because it wasn't mentioned a lot before that. It kind of might occasionally get added on as an afterthought. So just thought I'd highlight some of the things that that Hawara Taifenua are involved in. So we're involved in recruitment. This is mainly, around GPs and rural hospital doctors. They've recently started doing they've advocated and got involved with organising early pregnancy ultrasound training for midwives during COVID and cyclone relief. They got locum support essentially to these services. And I put the little statistics down on the bottom. Last financial year, there was approximately 120 doctors that they placed into rural GPs and hospitals. You've probably come across these GPs. If you do, please make them welcome. Hopefully, lots of them realise that they don't know everything, and you guys that are there longer term are a wealth of knowledge. I know certainly when I came over, it was great for me to be able to link in with the local pharmacist and find out how things were done in that area and how it all worked. Other things Hawara Taifenua do, rural to help promote rural health workforce. We try and encourage, we do rural school visits. We have a group of students from the students chapter that go around and do rural school visits to try and encourage students to stay hopefully learning rurally as much as we can. But if they do have to study in large urban centres, encouraging them to have placements in rural areas to keep them there. There we go. Advocacy is one of our big major things. If you haven't met Grant, he's our CE. Him and Fiona Bolden, who's the chair of the board, have regular meetings with ministers, both in current government and shadow ministers, advocating on a whole lot of things. So one thing that is organised by Rural Health Network is once a year they set up this thing called Rural Fest, which is a day when usually in the morning you get all the current health ministers and rural ministers and primary industry ministers, and they come in, and representatives from each of the chapters get to go and bring their concerns and worries for rural health and get to talk directly with the ministers about them and what they may or may not have solutions for, but they get to hear. And then in the afternoon is with the shadow ministers as well. They come and do the same thing. And that's been really great and gone down well, and produces the Rural Action Plan that Hawara Taifenua produce. They've also run the Māori Health Summit that was last done February this year as well. Then other things that we advocate for, or where we do, I have the fun of getting to go to field days. So although I've recently started work with Hawara Taifenua, I have volunteered with them over the last couple of years at the Mystery Creeks field days. I love it. It's this big, you can probably see the building there, but it's this big health hub that's set up with lots of different providers, providing lots of different health and advice to group of people who have come usually to buy tractors and things and wouldn't normally talk about their health, and it's a great opportunity to interact with them. So that's fun. And another thing that we do is run an annual primary care rural conference. And I'm doing a little bit of a plug. Our next one, so normally we have, it's just a national conference that we run for rural clinicians. And the one that's coming next year, so in Wellington, is actually an international rural one. It's combining it with our usual annual one for the 21st Wonka World Rural Conference. And you can ask me what Wonka stands for, and I've got to remember. It's World Organization of National Committees, Clubs, Academies, Associations for Family Doctors. They just missed that bit off the end because Wonka sounds good on its own. So other things that we've done. So some results of our advocacy to date. although Hawara Taifenawa Rural Health Network as a business has only been around for a few years, before that there was the Rural Health, I want to say Alliance. I can't remember the name, sorry. But they've been advocating for rural health for a long time. It was initially for primary care and for nurses, and then they've expanded to include all areas, so rural communities as well as allied health and research and education. So they were involved in advocating for the Payora Healthy Futures Act. And because of that, we've now got the rural health strategy. So rural, it's great. Like I worked a lot in the COVID directorate, and it was really important. We kept putting the rural lens on everything that we're doing. The geographical classification of health has come out. There's a rural workforce plan. And within Te Whatuora, there's now dedicated rural health teams focusing specifically on how can we get equity for our people that are living rurally and remotely rurally so that they have an equitable access to health. And obviously our government health targets now start getting reported with rural against urban data. So it really highlights the difference. We can now see that there is a difference. Hawara Taifenawa were part of paramedics becoming recognised under ACC regulations so that they can help work within general practice and help staff prime sites. As I mentioned earlier, they have regular meetings with the Ministries of Health, Mental Health and Rural Communities, as well as the shadow ministers. They were part of advocating for relocation payments for GPs coming from international places, and got funding for locum supports. I think I've mentioned the other things. Oh, they've been part of supporting the rural health roadshows that have gone around 12 rural communities over the last 6 months. So some of you may be placed in one of those. And then what's currently on our radar? What are we thinking about now? There are lots of things, so I just quickly jotted a few of them down. Sorry, these are a bit general practice focused. So we're looking at sustainable funding for rural general practices and hospitals. Workforce training, that's across the board. And as I say, I can't remember whether it's this one or the next one. I think I mentioned it in a minute, I'm jumping ahead, that we're really advocating to get those students being trained rurally, because we know if we train them rurally, they love working there. We all love working and living rurally, you become much more a part of the community. And if we train them there, they're much more likely to stay working there, which I know as pharmacists, you have the same problem with recruitment and retention that lots of other rural industries do. So that would be great. So if they come into your community, please feel free to welcome them in. Get them coming in, whether they're physios, pharmacists, doctors, nurses, invite them in, show them what you do. If you're part of that community, helping to provide them with some accommodation short term or just showing them around the town is really, really beneficial and useful. What else are we doing? Another big project we're involved with at the moment is the Rural Unplanned and Urgent Care. And I dive into that a little bit more at the moment in a minute. There are numerous issues with that. Again, how do we get equitable access to urgent and after hours care for people living in our rural communities? One of the solutions that comes up with is, well, access to telehealth services. There are numerous problems with that around data and connectivity, but another barrier is, well, it's great, you've had a telehealth consult, but then you need some antibiotics or you need some pain relief and it's later in the evening. You guys cannot work 24/7. So how is that medication provided in a timely way versus if you're living in a big urban area and you go to that pharmacy that's open nearly 24/7? And that's just a list of some of the recent submissions that Hawara Taifenawa have been involved in. Now I'll just move on to the next slide. So this is just diving a little bit more into this rural, urgent and unplanned care project that Hawara Taifenawa is part of. So this came out, the paper was issued in June of this year, and this is just a list of some of the things identified. And none of them will be surprises to you. You can see down on that list, access to medicines is one of the work streams, point of care testing, how do we make sure that any national contract that's produced is rural proofed, i.e. you have people with a rural know how rural works involved in writing the national contracts. It's not just the same as urban, and you move it over a little bit, there are unique differences. And then, oh, so diving a little bit more into this rural and urgent care planned project, I just thought I'd share with you there are 6 pilot sites for where they're trying different things for how it can work. It'd be great if any of you are at any of these pilot sites, but I just thought I'd show the one about improving access to medicine. So this is not necessarily what's going to happen in the future. They're just trialing this at some of the prototype sites. So one is in 2 of the sites in Twizel and Turangi. They're looking at trialing an on-call pharmacist, and that would be funded, and figuring out how that would work and at what time of night. At the moment, it's planned to go until 9 o'clock. Does that work? Doesn't it? What are the barriers? You know, sort of safety. You don't want to have a solo person going in and dispensing medication at night. So sorting through all of these barriers, would it work? Would it not? Is it sustainable? Another one is medicine kiosks, which you've probably heard of. And in my brain, I kind of think, oh, that would be lovely. You have like a vending machine type thing. It's way more complex than that. And actually legislation doesn't allow that to happen. But this is legislation that was written 40, 50 years ago. It's getting very old and outdated, but we know to change it would take a long time. So Te Whatuora and with the help of Harold Tawhenua are trying to work collaboratively with MedSafe to try and find a pathway through this to try and help this access to medicines. And obviously, seeking solutions with local pharmacies. Any ideas from you guys would be warmly welcomed as well. Similar thing around medicine depots is, again, how can we make these work in a safe and sustainable way so that people do get access to those medications? And then I'll just move on to the next one. So how can you help? As being part of a rural community, please voice if you have concerns around rural health, or if you've got local councillors or anyone that you can speak to and advocate to on the whole community's needs, but specifically around health and pharmacy issues is great, providing that rural representation. I think I mentioned it earlier, the supporting the medical and allied health students when they come out on their placements. I remember when I was a student, it's not something you get to do otherwise when you're training, but coming out and seeing how other professions work, what's involved with their job, helps give you a whole new insight and mutual respect for what you guys do. Otherwise, they just don't know. They get very cocooned in their own world, and doing it as a student is a great time to do it. I have to, oh, hopefully I've moved on. I have put representation on the rural scientific, technical and allied health chapter. I think it was one of the longer name chapters within Hauora Tai Whenua. Oh, and please, if you've got any concerns or anything you need to advocate on, we're more than happy for you to reach out to us. On the last slide, I've got my email address, happy to be contacted, or you can go through via Michael and he can contact us. But very happy to be contacted anytime. So I will hopefully stop sharing now. And feel
Thank you,
free to ask
Rebecca.
any questions.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I would like to open it for anyone who would like to ask Rebecca any questions. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
I was just wondering, Michael, whether I can make a couple of comments.
Absolutely.
I think I used up one of my 9 professional lies the other day when I challenged Martin Chadwick about the use. He was celebrating the allied workforce, global, everyone seems to have a day. And I said if there was an area of health professions that needed rebranding, that is it. And I guess I would challenge the group. You know, why is pharmacy not there as a separate profession? Why is it? And that's not for you, Rebecca, but that's something that I have wondered about since I've been in pharmacy. You know, you are a pivotal part. You're not an add-on. You're not an addendum. All the things that have been suggested may help, but they aren't going to help substantively. So I guess I'd like to know from the group, how can we shift the dial? Because we don't get money for, in terms of placement for our interns, we have the I don't even know how to say this, the rural bonding scheme, which took so long to actually process things, and it's such a pitiful amount of money, I don't think it would attract anybody. We see other people, and I'm familiar, Rebecca, from the rural hospital doctors and rural GPs, those interprofessional workforces. And I think the challenge that I've got to the group is, how do we break out of the silo, people? How do we stop being called allied health? How do we actually say, we're pharmacists, you're professionals, this is a role that we play, and we want to be heard as a single profession. So I'm just being a little bit provocative, Rebecca, but I do think I have a huge respect for the network. I have belonged to it for a long time, and in fact got Lanny, we now are members, and some of us are members, including Lanny. So it's an opportunity for us, and we need to think about how we can grab it and advance rural health, because we don't have our voice heard in the way that we should.
Yes. I see that David looks like David, you've unmuted yourself. No, not intentionally. Any questions from him? I know, Lana, you love to ask questions, and you've just unmuted yourself, so fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, I'll try and keep it short. Thanks, Helen, for that opening. I wasn't sure, if this is the right forum for it, but since you've made the address, that I've been to the Rural Health Conference and the Allied Health group. They're lovely people, Jane and Sarah. They're amazing people. But yeah, I agree with Helen is that pharmacy do need their own chapter. This is perhaps the start of it. And I also, when I was at the Rural Health Conference, what I did notice is that there were a lot of discussion about medicine, which is fantastic. But and then I just found myself the only pharmacist in the room, which could provide them with perspective. And it's a bit scary for me to think, these sort of conversations kind of happen without a presence of pharmacists to give some insight and advice. But to be honest, everything you raised before in your slide is fine. But I think it would have probably, David, you guys can Barack as well, you guys probably all jump in here. A lot of the work that we do, like delivering after hours and delivering medicine after hours, we already do that for free. And it's probably a problem for us community pharmacists in the rural areas that it's not sustainable to keep doing things for free. So if there was funding available, if there was collaboration available, your local pharmacy is there to listen to that. And it needs to be remunerated, because we can't all be doing it ourselves. We need to probably be able to, pay our staff to do it on our behalf as well. If we have staff, that is, like I can see some single operator here, most of us. But certainly, the reason why it's not publicly available information is because it's a goodwill gesture from most of us. But if there was a more formal arrangement available, the local rural community pharmacy are all ears, because it's something we do. We know our patients really well, just like you, and we would do anything to help our community.
I was going to say, I think that's one thing that I love about rural, that marks rural different from anywhere else, is that you become part of the community and the people more. So you go above and beyond and do, like you say, do that extra stuff, which turns out to be unpaid work, which is not fair. We all want to be funded for it. Absolutely. And I think that's where we've got the exciting opportunity at the moment. There won't be quick solutions, but with this urgent, unplanned after hours care, is how can that dovetail into things like that and having more of an awareness? I'm not saying I'm not employed by Te Whatuora to do that side of it. I can't say I know all the solutions to that, but absolutely, couldn't agree more.
Are there any other questions for Rebecca from the floor, or anyone would like to make some general comments are welcome as well. Anyone be involved in any of those? Vivian, are you if you are, you're on mute, or if you're talking in your house. Oh, you're on mute again. Vivian, you're on mute. There we go. Oh, how do we? There we go. Good.
Is that it?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Mine says mute. Okay. I guess the depots are my most invaluable asset. And I was called out this weekend for amoxicillin. And it was interesting for me because I was thinking that, in a perfect world, I think what we need to be doing now is having MPSO amounts of things that actually live at the depot that we can instruct the depot to be able to give out when the scripts come through, because we've got technologically, we actually quite connected. I mean, I can read the script, I can see the script. So it's we need to have our own MPSOs. And one of the things I would like to challenge Helen with is really about how do we manage this minor ailments, because really it is crazy out there. And I'm dealing at the moment with a telehealth doctor. Today he rang me for a renal dose on a patient that is on Valsiclava, or she had shingles and he needed a renal dose for her. And I was driving in my car looking up the renal drug handbook, to help him answer the question. So we're just constantly on tap. There's no way to turn off. And especially if you're on your own, we really have some challenges. And I think it's the first time I really felt in my life that I understand why rural pharmacists burn out. Because I think it's you just feel your life you've got your self-care, otherwise you cannot do this job.
Yeah, no, thank you, Vivian. I definitely hear you loud and clear in those messages about how you guys are always on, always, you don't turn off. And those, that feedback is really good. Something that is happening. This is a bit of a digression, but next week, the Pharmacy Sectors Leaders Forum, which has got ourselves, PSNZ, as well as the Guild, the Council, the pharmacy schools, the Independent Pharmacy Group, the Maori Pharmacists Association, and the rest, because I will keep going if I mention all the groups there, are coming together to talk about, lots of these challenges face to face. How do we overcome these challenges and create a better future for pharmacy next week? So it's really exciting. I mean, it's happening, but definitely a lot of what you've just shared is going to be echoed in that conversation, and rural is going to feature, I imagine, going to feature quite strongly. How do we create sustainable rural pharmacy? So thank you for sharing. And I think also, Angela, on your point around the technology, how do we use this great technology that we have, but actually enable you to, why can't you remote check and then enable someone to collect if we've made sure it's safe?
If I can just add, Michael, and again to be a little bit provocative, because I really rate the Rural Health Network, and I want to take, Lammy, I agree with Lanny's challenge. How does pharmacy get its own chapter within the group? Because undoubtedly, all the work we've been doing, looking at overseas jurisdictions, what they're doing is that is the future, pharmacy being part of the core rural health provision. And we've got to get our voice heard. And so we're in catch-up mode, but it's not too late. And what Michael didn't mention in terms of next Monday, there's two things that are happening. One is that David Moore, who's the managing director of Superior, who knows primary care pharmacy inside out and back to front, he's going to facilitate that for us pro bono, which is incredibly kind of him. And that report will go back up through officials to the minister. So it's a massive opportunity for us to start getting on the front foot. And yeah, we absolutely need to have. I think pharmacists are too nice. I think in rural you're way too nice, Vivian. That would be my response. But actually, it's been strategic about and I see again. I look at pharmacy at the moment, and I think sometimes there's a few red herrings that occupy people when actually we've got to look to the future and what pharmacy could look like in rural. And I think you could spend all your energy in the world fighting over a contract that needs to be fixed rather than thinking about the future, which then could actually unleash other funds, if that makes sense. So we actually are thinking, big and bold, and great to have Rebecca here because as the clinical director, she can hear us say that. So I think there's a real opportunity, Lenny.
Danny?
Oh, it's probably more of a question for Rebecca, actually. I was just,
Yeah, go.
reflecting on your slide about the rural doctors and how you managed to attract them to do their placement in rural area. What's been the most effective method, if you like? Did you guys have additional funding, or is it more, you went into the university and encouraged them to do it? What's been effective for you guys?
So Hauora Tai Whenua have a contract with Te Whatuora to run NZ locums, and so the contract is for NZ locums to recruit doctors from overseas to bring them into rural practices. Of which I was one of the recruits 19 years ago. So I came over with NZ locums 19 years ago. And so it's a variety of things, and they've kind of honed their skills over time. For me and for some of my colleagues, it was being attracted to the lifestyle. And, I was sat in the UK really busy, and I'd look and I'd be like, here's this beautiful rural place. So I came over to Raglan. And I was like, wow, look at this amazing beach town. Why have they not got GPs there? And at that time, they were really struggling to recruit any GPs. Things have changed since then. But it was selling me on the lifestyle for coming over. So that's how they often grab lots of them. But so that's more overseas. The work that they're looking at doing now and the research and things, it's, as I mentioned, if you want people out working rurally, you've got to train them rurally. You've got to get them out, because it's much more fun. Like, it's way more fun doing the number 8 wire fixed, working rurally, being part of that community and feeling that part of being at home and part of the larger family of the community. And then they're way more likely to come back. So that's where, and I know it's medicine again, but the Waikato Rural Medical School, hopefully that will flow on in years to come to then include pharmacy, other allied health. But I think there's no one simple answer. I know they have better success in when they bring doctors from overseas in matching them with their likes and interests, and having the honest conversation with people that actually, if you like going to lots of shops all the time in the local mall and going to the cinema all the time, then probably actually certainly remote rural or some rural places are not going to be for you, because you can't do that. So don't do it if that's not what attracts you. I wish there was a magic answer.
No, that's really good. It's
Yeah.
good to hear that, you obviously medicine have support from Health NZ for, because at the moment our training pathway is just a one size fits all, which doesn't actually suit rural community pharmacy. No. And in terms of, do you guys have any, because I guess even if we got funding, the next issue is that we don't have the workforce to train. Most of us are probably too busy working on our job. Did you guys have any how did you guys troubleshoot that in your in GP land?
So in the middle of trying to troubleshoot it, and some have managed to troubleshoot it and make it work, and others haven't. There are still lots of rural GPs, but urban as well, where you're just so busy because there's so many patients to see, so much complexity, that you're kind of heads down, bum up, and you don't have time to see the wood for the trees. And I think what we have to do is come out to places with the solution. People don't have time to try and reinvent the wheel each. Learn lessons from what's worked in other places, and then say, look, this is how you can integrate student or students into how you make things work. And I think people are way more likely to take it up. Certainly when I was rural GP, we would have loved to have students, but again, we were like, how do we make this work? If someone had come along and said, this is how you make it work, you'll have to tweak it, but here's a start, because it's much easier if you've got a start and then you tweak it than trying to invent it from scratch. We haven't solved all the problems.
It looks like you guys are ahead of us. Yeah.
Oh.
The big answer, Lenny, is money. It comes down
absolutely.
to cold hard cash. Having worked with the GPs and the rural hospital doctors, Rebecca, I know exactly what those contracts are. And it's publicly known, because I checked in the annual report the other day. We get roughly $1 million for our training program. Okay, I want you to guess, how much is a GP program getting every year, do you think? We get 1 million. How much do you think they're getting?
For what? For training or?
Yeah, for training, for their first year of training.
Oh,
Anyone can answer. This is
I'd have no
give
idea.
people a chocolate fish.
Is it the same number of students, Helen?
Yep, roughly. They're
Yeah,
getting 23 million.
Holy hecker.
Or was it 28? I can't never get it. It's either 23 or 28, but it's.
yeah,
And
I was
that
going for
means that
24.
a trainee gets paid around 100K. They get placed. They get all their exam fees paid. They have training days, 1 day a week off. We are, I wouldn't even say the poor cousins, not even Cinderella. We're still back in the mud hut, getting paid very little and actually having to pay to train. And also now there's this extra money going in to put GPs to do training in general practice. That locum contract is very generous. It actually allows the network to go overseas and recruit doctors and then to bring them to New Zealand. They run a very good 3-day orientation. We can manage a very cheap module. Don't get me started. It really makes me quite heated because it just seems so unfair that pharmacy is such a poor cousin to when it's equally important. So and it's historic. Various points when things could have changed, they didn't.
Yep.
And now we've just fallen so far behind, it's ridiculous.
I've got a couple of questions and a few things to say to Rebecca, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Rebecca, I'm in Taumarunui, so
Yep.
not too far away where you were. To be honest, like I've been here for 13 years, and your opinion of how people like living rurally, I haven't seen that. Every time I get someone to come live in Taumarunui, they like the job, but eventually it's a town that they don't really like. And I really can't change much about that. I can't do.
No.
I try my best. I do everything you said. I
Yep.
show them around, find them accommodation, way and above beyond what I'm required. So,
Yeah.
are we being honest with each other about how much people like living rurally? Because I've never seen that in my experience.
Oh, and so I have to say, I don't think it's all people. You have to find the right people, and that's really difficult because we still have the same problem in rural primary care and in the rural hospitals. Is that not everybody that goes and works there loves it? And as much as I've lived and worked rural for progression of my career and various things, I've now moved to a much less rural area. And so I'm equally one of those that hasn't stuck around lifelong. I think certainly when I was out as a practice owner, we kind of set up the business model assuming there was going to be a constant cycle of people, which is not great. And we all know continuity of care is better, but it's those few people that if you can get them and find them, like that's when you want to wrap everything around them.
The problem is now there's no continuity anymore. So
Yep.
a few years ago, we used to be able to put up an ad and might be able to find a pharmacist rurally. They'll come around for about a year and then they move on and someone else.
Yep.
That stopped. That's gone. And I'm sure my other colleagues here would agree.
Yep.
So I guess, is there a way that your network can help us recruit like how you recruit for doctors and nurses, or is it mainly GPs you guys do?
Oh, so they've got a contract with Te Whatuora for GPs specifically. And so they recruit rural GPs under that contract. Then there's a sort of smaller business offshoot to that where there's urban, where they just act as an urban recruitment agency for GPs, but there's fees associated with that for practices that use them. So again, it's probably similar to what Helen said. It's how can we advocate for funding more pharmacies for the same thing? Yeah.
Rebecca, do you guys have any data on your rural GP training and the retention rate of them staying for maybe 5 years after training? Anything like that you know?
Probably a very good question, but I don't know it off the top of my head. I know they've got some data around GPs that come in from abroad and how long they stay. And I know the College of GPs have got data on people who train as GPs and how long do they stay, but not specifically rural GPs. And it's all things like that we keep advocating, saying, well, we want the rural lens put on this. We want to know what's happening. As I say, I think for the GPs, we're ahead of you guys, but it's how can we help advocate and support you guys to catch up as well.
Sorry, it's Viv again. Just a bit of feedback. We've recently had a lady GP that came in from, I think she was from Denmark. She just wasn't happy at all. She felt very isolated, and I got the distinct impression she wasn't coming back. And I'm not seeing great retention where I'm from in Kyo.
No.
They feel overwhelmed. They feel unsupported. The hospitals are too far away. There's nobody to give them any backup. There's not enough nursing staff. So, yeah, she was really not happy, and I didn't get the impression she'd be coming back anytime soon.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm not saying that anybody's solved any of these solutions, and I don't know whether they came in through NZ locums or not. I was talking to a rural GP the other day, and they said they've learned long ago that sometimes putting a bum on the seat isn't actually helpful. You want to try and get the right bum on the seat appropriately. Because if you're just putting someone in a situation that they're not going to enjoy, they don't feel safe, they don't feel unsupported, then don't put them there in the first place, because it's not safe or comfortable for them, and patients aren't going to enjoy it. There are some doctors that love working in that own independent way, but there are some that don't. And yeah, completely. And if you ever have somebody that's like that, or you're worried about them, you can reach out and say you're concerned, either to them or reach out to the primary health organisation that owns the practice if they do, or owners. It is difficult. There are lots of rural practices that are solo GPs that can't get doctors, so you might get a short-term doctor or nurse practitioner, and that must drive you guys bonkers as well, because then they sometimes do weird and wonderful things with prescriptions because they're not used to the way that things are done in New Zealand. So, oh, we're far from perfect in rural general practice, definitely.
Rebecca, do you have any example on like how I guess the rural GP network, which is probably the biggest network, have supported say the other network like midwife or nurses or allied health? Yeah.
So this is just, yeah, this has been my impression just coming in, is that at the moment there's not a huge amount of cross-chapter support. Literally, I've only just come along. So that would be an interesting thing to, how can, if one chapter's learnt one thing, how does that get passed along? I know there are council meetings where you get representatives from each of the chapters coming, and they're held regularly to share ideas on what people are working on. But it would be great to share those things around a little bit more, like you say, and get support.
We recently had a politician visit,
Yep.
and I think you were there, Lanny. And that was really helpful to some extent, because it did draw all the different health professionals together. But it's a pity that it's, because I mean, we're all trying to hit up the politicians for more help, and none of us are really getting it. But we need to do that without maybe the politicians, and better lobbying together.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's where Hauora Tai Whenua can help, because they do have the regular meetings with the ministers. Ministers want short, succinct ideas, and they love it when we take solutions. If you go with just problems, they struggle a little bit. But if you can go with potential solutions, and yes, some of the solutions might be funding attached to that solution, but if you start talking about it enough and advocating, sometimes they do listen.
Maybe you can advocate for us as pharmacists.
Well, that's why I'm here, because obviously I have my own internal bias. I'm a rural GP, and I try my best to set those biases aside. But as clinical director, I'm here to represent all the chapters. So that's why I want to hear these stories. I want to hear those specific stories, because it helps.
I'll share with you a story. The only sort of solution to my workforce shortage at the moment is, and I'm not sure it's a solution that's going to work, but it's bringing overseas pharmacists, and after jumping through many hoops and lots of different exams, they can become intern pharmacists for a year,
Yeah.
And at the end of the year, if they pass, they can become registered pharmacists in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Now, that's the same as a student. So when they pass all these exams and jump through various hoops, they can they're just like a pharmacy student graduate,
Yeah.
and the pharmacy and the local graduates, the course, the funding, it's about $5,000, and there's government funding for that. So I think it ends up costing around 2.5 grand or something like that that
Yeah.
the pharmacy has to pay for. For overseas pharmacists, it's $12,000, and I don't think there's any funding. I think PSNZ managed to get some funding this year. I don't know how you guys did it, but there isn't any. So this is a discrimination against rural. I want to say discrimination, but it's like it's postcode health, because
Yep.
the only potential solution, and I'm not, we're not even sure it is a solution, to give me some help and other rural pharmacies help, is not funded. It's not being supported. Whereas, because what's happening is a lot of the local students tend to go in urban areas. So the only options rural pharmacies can get are overseas pharmacists. So and so, but we have to for 12 grand next year. I'm going to take on two of them because I'm
Yep.
that desperate. So that's $24,000 that I don't get any funding for that. And I'm increasing the pool of workforce, like pharmacists for the
Yeah.
country, but I'm having to fork it out of my own pockets, Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
do you guys have
Absolutely.
any grants that you can give me, funding I can tap into?
I wish we had money, but hearing these stories is what's good, because this is what
Mm,
happened in the past with rural general practices as well. It became really unequitable. Rural general practices weren't able to get any doctors. Most of them were going urban, and so they were having to pay recruitment agencies massive fees just to bring a doctor in from overseas. And that's where there was lots of advocacy and took a long, long time. And that's where Te Whatuora has come on board with this funding for the rural GP contract from abroad. So again, I can't promise that things happen quickly, but hearing stuff like that is what's important to us, so that we can keep that and go, right, how can we make it work
mm,
for pharmacy? And I know we're talking about pharmacy, but other health professionals as well.
mm. Because Helen, what you said about the doctors, so do they pay the students as well for their first year of training?
Um,
You're on mute, Helen.
Barack, I mean, in 2012, they were getting paid about $12,000 a tax-free grant if you were a GP trainee. And then the government employed them because of addressing the health workforce issue. So we're 13 years behind. And over time, that payment has increased to more than 100,000 for the average
Oh,
first
so
year, plus everything else paid for as well.
so a GP clinic to get a student, they don't have to pay them.
Yep.
Oh my God, that's so unfair.
There
That's
is a
very
few that
unfair.
there are some who are called practice employed, and
Yes.
they are, so the practice does pay some of the cost, but that's the minority. Most of them are paid for. Well, I mean, I think one of the things that we can bring up next, so Michael, we provide the secretariat for this Pharmacy Sector Leaders Forum, but Michael will be around the table and he can certainly advocate for one of the action items being to, I think the action could be that you actually just do a comparison, people, of the difference between the financial support. Like, we've got this class coming out of Waikato. How, is the government thinking about, that's the whole purpose of it. That was the ethos behind getting a medical school, as Rebecca mentioned, was to, train rural, they'll go rural. Well, what's happening to make sure that a good number of those 20 plus people distributed across that central North Island, where they, I don't know.
I've emailed them, the school, and I've expressed interest in taking on students, and nothing. I haven't heard anything back. Yeah, so
I'll ask Ree when
and
she's come. I'll see Ree on Monday, so I'll ask her.
okay, yeah, thank you.
And I saw
So yeah, that's really unfair. Sorry, that's really unfair, Helen.
That's
It's
really
highly
unfair.
unfair.
I feel very cross on
I,
your behalf, Barack.
yeah, not only are we paying, my interns, which I don't mind paying,
Yeah.
he's working, but I pay for their for the cost of the study, and honestly, way and above normal support. I mean, he's like my little brother. I bought him clothes because it's too cold here, all sorts of stuff. Found him accommodation. I study with him on the weekends, all sorts of stuff like that that I don't get anything for. But yeah, it just seems very, very unfair.
So,
It is.
noting that we have 5 minutes ago, I see Ginny has popped her hand up a couple of times very patiently. So I'm going to give the last question / comments to Ginny.
Oh, no pressure, Michael. So yeah, it just seems to me that the threshold for becoming a pharmacist from overseas is too high. And I actually am a pharmacist from overseas. I trained in South Africa, but I came straight here, and all I needed to do was a exam in pharmacy law and 6 months internship. But if it's possible to recruit GPs from overseas that don't need to do an entire medical degree again, which is pretty much what our pharmacists need to do a lot of the time, perhaps one of the things the society could do is lobby for an easier path. I mean, we're just dispensing medicines, a lot of them. We're doing other things as well, and we're, that there are those things that you do as accredited, but it's not like if you can do the law, you can do the pharmacy. You don't need to be, do quite as much training over here as people are required to do.
And so we definitely are having conversations around, who is on the current list of the REC countries and who is on the non-REC countries, and are those lists correct? Do we need to have some changes there? How do we move someone over to the REC list to help move people through easier?
With the council, Michael, or
yes, and then these that conversations with the council, but that would also be part of the conversations I anticipate probably going to happen next week as well, because there needs to be alternate pathways to get in, not just the one, because I think it's horrific that someone who's at Waikato who is these people who've got 4 years undergrad, a couple of years postgrad, and then come into another couple of years postgrad is the easier option to be a pharmacist here. They're highly educated individuals. There needs to be different routes, or a more sensible way of doing this. So we are absolutely echoing those conversations.
So sorry, Michael, is there going to be, I did hear that the council is looking
these are very very early conversations this June that we are having. We're echoing what we're hearing from people like Ginny and having these conversations with them, but they are early conversations.
I mean, what do GPs have to do to register here? Rebecca, what do you have to do?
So it does depend on which country you're from. Some countries, they do have to start right again, pass medical exams, and then start right at scratch first year at hospital.
Are they starting their undergraduate degree again?
No, they have to pass an MCQ exam and then a clinical exam. And if they don't pass either of those, then they don't get in. If they do pass, there's no guarantee of jobs. They then have to apply for a PGY1 post in hospitals. So as first year junior doctors again, and these could have been doctors that have worked for 20, 30 years abroad. But that's just some countries. There are some countries that are cross-recognised, and then there's another list of how you cross-recognise vocational training in general practice as well.
So it seems that that the amount of training you need to do afterwards depends on your ability to pass a clinical exam, whereas ours doesn't necessarily test the clinical knowledge. Anyway, time's up.
And then the last thing I'll say as well, so Rebecca alluded or talked about the Wonka in her slides. So just to share with you that this is obviously not solving any of our actual problems in rural pharmacy, but Helen, myself, and the team are exploring how we would sponsor some attendance to the Wonka conference, and possibly adopting your model that you shared at PSNZ Connect, Ginny, for the Canterbury West Coast branch. So watch this space. We'll hopefully get some pharmacists along to Wonka because it's in New Zealand this year. So I think it's a really great opportunity to attend. So we'll figure out how we're going to do that and how many we're going to enable.
I'll come as long as I've got a pharmacist.
Oh,
Yeah, I
and
was
then
thinking.
And it's in
therein lies the
April, isn't
problem
it?
is like, can you get a pharmacist to cover you to go? Yeah.
It's in April, isn't it? The flu, like peak
Yep.
season of the flu thing. Yeah.
So
There's a good
right,
chance I'll come.
we might be
Yeah.
presenting. I've put a submission in
Oh, you
for
have
us. So
fantastic,
Oh,
Lenny.
no, I never.
I think I've also
I
got
haven't heard
process
back yet.
submission.
Yep. We might
I
get
think
selected.
we've submitted a poster as well from the West Coast.
Fantastic.
It's a really inspiring conference. One of the most inspiring conferences I've attended. I went to Rural World Wonka in Cairns a few years ago, and it was just because it's people like you, people dealing with the same issues. It's like almost a relief, I think, for you to go and find out that everybody else around the world has the same stuff going on and different solutions. So
Has,
real
Helen,
collegiality.
sorry, I know we're going over time. Has there been any improvement in rural pharmacy in other countries or jurisdictions in general? Or is there any? Yeah.
Chris J has been looking really closely at that, and we're really excited actually that the new CEO of Pharmac comes from Alberta in Canada. She identifies as a pharmacist. She says, "Hello, I'm a pharmacist," which is great, and she's really keen to talk to us about what they do in Alberta, which is not a dissimilar, like a huge rural hinterland. They're allowed to do more. So what we're doing is building allies kind of one at a time, aren't we, Michael? And building networks. So we definitely are well on our way to knowing. We've got Steve, who's the CEO of PSA Australia, coming over for this forum, paying for himself to come over and talking about what they're doing in Australia because they have the same issues. So yeah, we're definitely working very hard on your behalf to build our knowledge and networks.
Yeah.
And we've got
Thank
Lenny
you.
working hard.
Sorry, I know we were well over time, but I do have one burning question for Rebecca. One of the issue why pharmacy, well, in my opinion, and I'm sure some of you might agree as well, that we have a workforce issue is that we do have clustering of pharmacy in the main centre. And that's one of the things I raised with Matt Ducey when I met with him in the rural conference, and I just got completely shut down with that discussion. And pharmacists have always asked for some sort of location rule, not because of a competition thing, but it's just because we simply just have way too many pharmacy in the main centre.
Yep.
And that's stealing our workforce away. And I think GP have similar issue. I just wanted to know how what is your position on that, and what do you guys, what does from your GP perspective, length, do you guys have hold the same grudge or sentiment as rural pharmacists on that side of things?
Probably partly. In the past, it used to be a little bit more difficult to open a general practice. You kind of had to get permission in order to open one. It seems to have been a lot easier recently because there's just so much work for everyone. But definitely it's way easier to there's more people opening up practices in large urban areas than there are rural. And generally people wouldn't necessarily go to rural because if you've got an established general practice there, it's not quite the same as pharmacy where there'd be that sort of competition. You've got an established general practice. Generally they would go and work there rather than open up separately. I'm sure, not that you guys want the competition, but it'd be great if you get a pharmacist wanting to come rurally, because then you want them to come and work with you in your business. But yeah, it's definitely easier. It's never been a big issue really within general practice. It's just more recruiting to rural. It's just difficult.
Well, thank you, Rebecca, very much for joining us this evening, and thank you everyone for engaging in the conversation. And obviously for attending our second Rural Hui. We are going to continue these and hopefully build some momentum around this, and we are going to continue building our relationship with the Rural Health Network. And now we've got our insider Rebecca, who is our inside line to using them to help our advocacy work. Helen, did you have any closing comments? Or you?
No, I just, I hope you can tell that I do feel very strongly that pharmacy's got a raw deal, particularly in rural. So we will keep supporting you, and that's certainly totally supportive of what general practice are doing, Rebecca. It's not an either or; it's an and.
Yeah.
And we just need to get our voice, and this is the start of doing it. I think we've actually made good progress this year. From starting from scratch, so it's just onwards and upwards, really.
Thank you everyone for joining us this evening, and I hope you have quiet rest of your evenings with no one getting any on-call requests for dispensings in the rural areas.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.